Hello, Michelle. How are you today? What's going on?
I'm good, Lindsay. I'm good. How are you?
I'm excited to be here. I had a great weekend. I went skiing over the weekend. Yeah, lots of good stuff. Lots of good stuff. Feeling great. What about you? Did you spend a little time
Good.
in Manhattan over the weekend?
Yes, I did. I went to another part. I actually stayed in Times Square. There was a good deal, and I know it sounds very funny to do that for someone who is very familiar with the city, but
It does.
it's not easy to get someone to take care of my son, and
Yeah. Uh-huh.
so we were able to get his grandparents to watch him, and we just said, "Let's just do it. There's a good deal." And just to go to a hotel and feel like you're away even though you're not. So
I love that idea. It's kind of like a staycation in a way,
right,
right? You're in
it
your own
is.
city, you're in a touristy part of your own city, but you're in a hotel, so you could be anywhere and you can get room service. You could really
Yeah.
enjoy the evening. I love that idea. We make the most of what we have in that moment, right, Michelle?
Right, exactly. We couldn't go much further than that. So we just decided to do it. So it was a fun time, but definitely reminded me that as much as I love New York, Times Square is not my favorite neighborhood.
Oh yeah. No, no, we've talked about that on the show.
Yeah.
We've told all our listeners don't go to Times Square, right? No. We've told them don't hang out there, right? Don't hang out there because that really is a very touristy area. Things are really expensive. Hang out in Union Square, right?
Yes.
Or West Village or the East Village, Alphabet City. Where else,
The Upper
Michelle?
West Side, the Upper
Upper
West
West
Side.
Side. You love the
Yeah,
Upper West Side, Central
I do.
Park. You can find a lot of locals jogging in Central Park. Like, do the local thing, get a coffee, get a paper. If anyone even
Chelsea.
gets papers anymore, Chelsea, yeah, the art
Yeah.
galleries, right? Hmm.
Yeah, it's just there's so much to explore. So if you want to stay in Times Square, stay there, take a walk around, get some pictures, and then move.
Yeah, totally, totally. I love it. And Times Square does kind of have a bad rap, but I think there's a reason for it. I think it's well deserved.
Oh, look at what you just did there.
Look
I
at that,
loved it.
Michelle. I'm usually not as good as you are at the transitions like that, but today I'm
That
bringing it
was
out.
good. No, you are
Mhm.
always very good at that. But yes, we are going to talk about this expression you use to have a bad rap. Okay.
Yes.
So what a funny what a funny expression. So we're going to get into that today. But guys, we want to remind you that if you haven't checked it out yet, or if you have checked it out yet, we have the IELTS Energy podcast with Aubrey and Jessica. And it is amazing over there. If you're preparing for IELTS, it is entertaining, it is educational, it is all of the good stuff. Right, Lindsay?
All the good stuff, guys. And it's real because Jessica was an examiner for 14
That's
years and Aubrey
right.
has now learned everything Jessica knows. So you are working with true IELTS experts over there. So go over and hit follow on the IELTS Energy podcast, guys. So, Michelle, I'm excited. To be honest, I've always wondered about this phrase. I've always been a
Yeah.
little confused. What confuses me is why, I guess we're talking about reputation here, right? Times
Hmm.
Square gets a bad rap, but
Hmm.
why are we
Hmm.
saying rap when it seems like we should say rep, like
It's a good
reputation?
question, right? But we don't say a bad rep. We say a bad rap, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
why? I mean, that's so weird.
I don't know. And I didn't really look. I want to talk about the usage today. I don't quite know the origins or why it happens, but it's just interesting. So yeah, a bad rap,
Mhm.
RAP, and it means a bad reputation.
Yes.
So Times Square gets a bad rap, right?
Hmm.
In New York City because it's expensive and it's busy and all sorts of things.
Yes.
So I mean, do you think that? However, I mean, you agree you don't really love Times Square. So maybe, you would use another expression for it. But do you think in general, like, it's fair? Like, if you say something has a bad rap, does it mean it's fair? Or is it saying, like, oh, that has a bad rap, but like it doesn't deserve
Ooh, that's a good question. Ooh, I think
it?
okay, I think it's all about what you put before it. If you say it
Mm,
gets a bad rap, maybe that means it's unfair. Oh, it gets a bad rap, but it's actually
right.
okay. Um,
Right.
but ooh, don't go there, it has a bad rep. I think it's actually sometimes pointing to the fact that it's unfair a lot of times. And
I
it actually
think
isn't
so.
that bad. What do you think, Michelle?
Yeah, I think that often it's used like that. It's kind of like, oh, it has a bad reputation, right? In a way, but like
Mhm.
that it doesn't necessarily deserve it.
Deserve it.
But
Mhm.
it could be used the other way. Like for example, she got a bad rap for
Mhm.
being picky after she couldn't choose anything to eat at the company dinner.
Yeah.
So maybe this is fair. Maybe she really is very picky, but maybe it's like, oh, that was that one incident, and now everyone kind of knows her for that, which is unfair.
You gotta be careful what you do the first 2 weeks at a new workplace, right?
Right, right.
I think
So
it just
yeah.
points to the fact that it's reputations kind of essentialize people or things no matter what. It's
Mhm.
essentializing something, right? Which isn't always fair. It's never really fair. If you say you are this one thing, right? Times
Right.
Square, I guess, could be many things. It could be excitement. Maybe there's good food in Times Square somewhere. I haven't found it yet.
Well, it's just so expensive. And yeah,
Yeah.
it's actually, you know what? My first date with Dan wasn't too far from Times Square, but unfortunately the place shut down.
Oh, like
And
a
it was a
Hell's
good
Kitchen kind of
place.
thing?
Yeah,
Mhm,
yeah. So Hell's
mhm.
Kitchen, it's interesting because you walk one or two avenues over and then you have a whole bunch of good stuff.
Yes,
So it's
exactly.
really, I'm just talking about like the real, I mean, you also have Bryant Park nearby, which
Oh,
there are
yeah, I love
some
it.
options, but
Mm.
I don't know. I
Mhm.
think, more like Ninth Avenue has a lot of good stuff. So it's like, if you
Yes,
just go a little bit outside, there's a lot of
exactly.
good places.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think, today we're talking about reputations, and reputations do just point at they make someone or something just one way, and it may
Mhm.
not be true because nothing is that simple, right?
Right.
That's why it's the deceiving factor of this, right? Let's give some more examples, Michelle. Are you ready? Here's one.
All right,
Okay.
go for it.
All right. So 2-year-olds get a bad rap for being difficult. Now that's probably true for the majority of 2-year-olds, right? I mean, what do
That's
you
true.
think?
It's a mixed bag. I mean, every day is
Yeah.
different. I have a 3-year-old now, so but as a 2-year-old, he was yeah. I mean, I think I you know what it is? I think it's like, oh, the terrible twos. People know that expression, so
Yes.
they think. I partially think that what happens is the kid gets to be two, and it's like, oh gosh, and
Yeah, it's
it's not
coming.
it's
Mhm.
not necessarily fair, and also developmentally there's so much going on, so it's not really just, oh, they're difficult. It's like their brains are
It's more
what.
than that. Yeah, it's more complicated, but society
Right.
just makes it so simple, like, "Oh, they're terrible." But actually they're just developing, they need a little extra help, or they're confused or something.
Hmm.
As we all
Or
are all the
yeah.
time.
Exactly. Or here's another example. So strict teachers can get a bad rap with their students, but sometimes they are the best at what they do. So Lindsay, did you ever have a really strict teacher that ended up being like your favorite because you realized they were wonderful?
Yeah, this definitely happens when you're growing up, right?
Yeah.
There's always that teacher that everyone is a little afraid of throughout the whole school because they have a bad rap.
Yeah.
But when you get in their class, you realize, yes, they're stern. And that's another great keyword for today. If you're in the app,
Stern.
guys,
Yes. Yes.
uh, they're stern, they're strict, they're maybe a little mean at times, but they actually are the best teacher and they care about you learning the most,
Hmm. Yeah, and
right?
then usually when you as time goes on, then you realize like how great they are, and then at the end you're
Mhm.
crying, and they're
You
like, "That's
miss
the best
them.
teacher I ever
Yeah.
had," right?
Exactly. Like, I remember there was this teacher in 3rd grade, Mr. Sullivan, and he was the math teacher, and everyone thought he was so mean, but I remember seeing he had his students, like, marching and reciting all the times tables way before my class was, and
Mm,
I was like, "Oh my gosh, he must be doing something right because all these kids they know their times tables too early." So then you get
mm,
respect for the teacher. It's kind of
right.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I had teachers, a lot of teachers like that,
Yeah.
that seemed, the first day you're like, oh my gosh, and that's going to be so tough. And then
Mhm.
when I think about it, yeah, I think my favorite teacher ever was just kind of like that.
Yes, yes.
So yeah,
Yep.
so that teachers can get a bad rap when they seem like that. Maybe they're not like the goofy one from the beginning, or they have a serious look, or they give a lot of work. And then, yeah.
Mhm.
Or
Mhm.
let's
Yes.
do another example, one more.
Okay. That store got a bad rap for their terrible customer service.
Mm.
right? And this is hard too, because the fact is not
Mm.
every, happy customers don't always leave a review. They just go on with their day because their life has been made easier at that store, right? That
Right.
it's really just like
Yeah.
either you have an amazing experience and maybe you have the time or you're used to leaving a review, or you have a terrible experience. So I think reviews of stores and restaurants are not always fair, you know?
No, no, it's not. And people can be just like very bitter and be like, well, I'm gonna write something terrible. And and
Yeah,
it's really not
yeah.
fair. And especially I think with things that went on with like the global health crisis, like I think people had
Mhm.
to kind of be nicer about stuff because we
Mm,
have to like give people grace and like let some things go because it was just so
yes.
hard for everybody, and especially in things like the service industry,
Oh my gosh, yes.
to get through it. And so I think I would have never, especially during the worst of that time, written a bad review about a
Mhm.
restaurant or anything.
Yeah, no, I mean, even now, I mean, restaurants are
Yeah,
struggling to hire to get a full
right.
staff, right? So you got to give them a pass. And that might be another phrase for today, give them a pass,
Mm.
let it go, right, guys? That's such a
Hmm.
native and natural phrase. You're not going to learn that in your textbooks. So,
Nope.
Michelle, did you ever get a bad rap for doing something as a kid? Maybe you climbed a tree, or I don't know, maybe you like stole candy from a store or something and you didn't know any better. Did you ever get a bad rap for doing something?
Oh my gosh, that's a great question. That I can't quite think of an answer to. Do you have an answer?
I got a bad rap for doing stupid things when I was a kid. Like once I put my head through a railing at a furniture store and got it stuck.
Oh no! Oh my gosh!
Yeah, like I was like, oh, let's see what happens if I put my head in here, because I was 3 or 4. I was bored. My parents were
Oh
looking at
no!
furniture and I got it
Oh
stuck.
no!
And I don't know if they had to like use I don't know, the
Like butter?
jaws, like the jaw or something. I'm not sure how they got me out, but I definitely, yeah. So I guess I got a bad rap for being a troublemaker sometimes.
That's pretty funny. I mean, my friend, I think I've talked about it before, actually, in maybe the past couple months. My friend, she had a bad rap for like always breaking bones,
Oh,
or
breaking her
spraining
own bones.
things.
Her bones,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And yeah, her bones. And it would just always be like, oh, she fell again. Like it was just like, so I guess she had a bad rap for that. But yeah, I mean,
Oh.
Lindsay, how important do you think reputation is in the world today? Because I think that, like you mentioned,
Mm.
like there's all these sites, where you can put your reputation, your
Yes.
reviews, and it's gotten a little scary with social media, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, this brings up the concept of cancel culture. Cancel culture. I hadn't even heard of that term until a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And now it's all over the place. And some of it's deserved fully.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I think we do make snap judgments when we could allow people to just kind of talk a little bit more, explain a little bit more. Let's hear
Yeah.
the context, like where they're coming from. So it depends on the person and the situation. But yeah, I think the internet is unforgiving.
Hmm.
Absolutely unforgiving. One wrong move, if you're famous nowadays and you're canceled, you're gone, right?
That
So,
is
what do you think, Michelle?
true. Yeah, that is true. And I think
Yeah.
it can be scary for people to speak sometimes. And we
Yes.
do need to be careful
Yeah.
with what we say.
Of
And very
course. Of
sensitive to those
course.
things. But I do think that sometimes
Yeah.
there's just like a new fear that, because everything is everywhere.
Right.
So yeah,
Mhm.
it can be a little scary, probably.
Yeah, so if we're not allowed to like talk, then that
Hmm.
that creates an even worse environment, right? Like we don't
Hmm.
learn if we don't talk through things and understand things.
That's
So
right.
it's really tricky. At the same time, we're fully responsible for everything we say. So that's really tricky. And yeah, I do think that social media just makes this even worse.
Right.
100%.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Mhm.
Oh my gosh, so
Yeah.
much to talk. We could do a whole episode on this topic.
We could.
But yeah, things are happening. It seems like every day there's a new story of something that comes out and somebody
Yeah.
said something and now it's like, "Oh gosh, what's going to
I
happen to that
know.
person?"
I know, it's really interesting. So bad rap, easy to get a bad rap or a bad reputation.
Mhm.
And then so I guess we have to worry about, of course, we have to be very conscious of, what we're saying and the impact of our words, especially if we're famous. famous, right? If you're famous, like your words do have an impact. Michelle, are
Right.
there any other ways to say this that our listeners love multiple ways to say things? So what could we teach them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, one is a bad name. It makes me think of, is that John Bon Jovi song, You Give Love a Bad Name? I
Oh, yeah. I
I
love
think it's
John
Bon
Bon
Jovi.
Jovi.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I love
Uh,
good songs. So you could say like that office got a bad name for always posting the wrong opening times on their window.
so does that literally mean like they got a like they have a poor name for their office, a restaurant, like is it, or
No.
meaning a bad reputation, right? That's what
A
we're
bad
trying to say
reputation.
here.
Exactly.
Okay, good.
Exactly. So
Mhm.
like I don't know if you've ever been somewhere and like that it has the wrong time on the website or wrong time, and then it's like, can get pretty
Yeah.
frustrating.
Yeah, that's happened to me even just in the last week where you show up, you're
Oh.
like, well, it said on Google that you're open,
Yeah.
but you're closed. And yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that
Uh,
can be upsetting.
and then the one that we've just been coming back to our whole conversation, Michelle, it's just a bad reputation,
Yeah,
right?
you
So
can say
instead of a
that.
bad rap, yeah. So she has a bad reputation for being snarky to her colleagues. That's a good bonus
Oh.
word for today, Michelle.
Snarky.
Yeah.
Like a little bit nasty.
Nasty, a little nasty, right? Some rude
Mhm.
comments here and there. Do you
Mhm.
know anyone who can be snarky?
Of course I do. Of course I do.
Okay.
I'm sure I could name a lot of people, but I wouldn't.
But you won't. You won't name them.
No,
Yeah,
I won't. But
maybe you won't.
everybody knows snarky people, or
Mhm,
so
mhm, mhm.
that's never easy. But I know a lot of
Yeah.
nice people.
So this has been interesting today, Michelle, talking about this very common phrase that's always confused me personally, right? Rap, rep, and we still don't know exactly why it's rap.
Mhm.
But you know what? Maybe it comes from like rapport,
Maybe
RAPPORT, a good rapport. It could be that, right? Rapport means profession, like a relationship. So that
could
could
be
be
that.
something like that. But what's the takeaway for our listeners today?
Guys, this is a useful phrase. We've taught you how to use it and some other ones. And it's also important to consider why something has a bad reputation. Like, is it
Yeah.
fair? Is it deserved? So to think deeper about it, not just listen to, oh, this review said this.
Yeah.
So
True.
I think that's important to think about it on a deeper level.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's really what politics is, right? If we just go with the slogans and the commercials and the news coverage on Fox or even CNN, like we just assume we think like everyone else. But if we
Yep,
go a little deeper, understand viewpoints, and then decide for ourselves what we think, it's better, right? We can live a
that's very
smarter
good.
life. Yes, I love it. So good, Michelle. This has been fun. Guys, remember, go over and get the IELTS Energy podcast.
Yes.
Good stuff. Michelle, I'll see you soon. Take care.
All right. Bye, Lindsay. Bye, guys.